Hey there, podcast listeners! Welcome to our brand new weekly podcast program where we want to tackle our past in our 20s and 30s age range of life called My LCM. And take note, it's not least common multiple, it's life changing moments. This was be the supposed program that we're going to use and be able to develop everything for the best of our ability in our vlogging. But, unfortunately, it was short-lived and made it going hiatus to be able to see which title could make us go through and be able to see our moments go change with our lives. One may simply ask, what is this My LCM, My Life in 20s and 30s podcast show? Because some people are really curious of what program is this all about. But before we proceed with our main discussion for tonight, can I have a request from you to please click on that follow button below the My LCM on Spotify so that you can be able to get your moments to be able to listen to my weekly stories every Monday at 6 p.m. with this My LCM, My Life in 20s and 30s. Again, if you are new to podcasting, if you are new to podcast listening rather, and you are here on Spotify, and you bumped into our podcast, welcome to our program. Please consider to click on that follow button and be able to be notified whenever we post new episodes every Monday. So before we take it in, let's go first with our first podcast episode, Who Am I? Story time. You may have probably seen me in some episodes recently in our podcast called Jamie TV Podcast with the Thrilled For You logo. And yes, some of the video episodes in that particular podcast network involves yours truly. So for those who doesn't know me, let me introduce you honestly of who am I. So basically, the Jamie there in our podcast called the Jamie TV Podcast has some meaning to be able to be shared with you publicly. So this is the first time that you will hear why there is so-called Jamie TV Podcast. So the JMA in Jamie represents my real name. Yes. And if you heard that, my real name is John Michael Angelo. Sounds a name, right? You might be able to mix up my name and still you can get a name. But my real name has something to do with three things. One, I was involved in a saint or two saints rather, which is Saint John the Baptist and the Evangelist, Michael or Saint Michael rather, which is an archangel, and my last name Angelo. Yes, you've heard it right. My last name is Angelo. Angelo means angel. And basically, the third thing that you would like to know is that my John Michael has a meaning in that particular name. And that name means my decency is never questioned. Now, you may have recently heard those names in some shows on radio whenever I interact with hosts. Of course, you might have heard the name J.M. Angelo, John Michael, J.M., etc. in some radio shows. But now, with the Y, you might be curious why there is a Y in a J-M-A-Y. Well, basically, simply, the Y there is I'm always involved with the first video social sharing site I always loved. And that's particularly the ones that you love most whenever you see Bardagulan, whenever you see reaction videos, whenever you see news, sometimes fake news, sometimes real news, and that is YouTube. But basically, there is something new with this Jamie. And that Jamie means just me and you. Meaning, you are involved in our conversation. And yes, and that Jamie TV podcast simply means that all of the episodes involves you in this conversation. So whenever we post new episodes on Jamie TV Podcast, click on that follow button as well on Spotify or Jamie TV Podcast. You'll be able to be involved in the conversation after you hear the episode. So we always post questions like, what would you like to, what do you love in this episode? So whenever we post that particular question and answer, so all you need to do is to click on that, or shall we say, get in that with that answer, and be able to answer what do you love most in that particular episode. And we're always reading it. So if you are a lover of answering questions, you might be able to bump into the Q&A of some episodes. So, now going back to our Who Am I? Let's go with our main story time. So let me basically describe myself of who really am I. Story time. I was born sickly, and every time I go to hospital, I was sick because of the convulsions that I got because I got shivers when I was a baby. Yes, I was a sickly baby before, and I really had a hard time to be able to cope up with life until I was 7 years old. That really happened to me every year, of course, whenever my birthday approaches. Sometimes, when I got sick and my father is near the airport, he will always get us to travel down to the hotel nearest to the airport, and I was able to recover. Totoo yun. Totoo yung narinig ninyo of what I have said a while ago. When I got sick and my father is near the airport, he will always get us to travel down to the hotel nearest to the airport, and I was able to recover. Why? Because my father is my strength. Although my mother is also my strength too, but my father gives me strength to be able to get back to my school. So every time that my birthday approaches, it was like a birthday leave when you're in a work. And that's true enough. And in the later episodes of this podcast program, I would like to share with you what happened to my work in the particular situation that I was involved in a BPO industry. You might be able to get into realizations when we will be able to get there on our podcast program. So going back. So again, every time that my birthday approaches, it was like a birthday leave when you're in a work. And since I was in school that time when I was a kid, actually not a kid, when I was young, it was like a birthday leave of absence and be able to present a medical certificate the following day after I recover from sickness. Yes, and that's true enough. And sometimes, when my birthday knocks off on a Friday, take note, a Friday, because I was born on a Friday of 12:44 p.m. I was to get to the hotel to go absent because, like what I have said to it, I was quite a sickly child. Now, moving fast forward, I'm called by my classmates in elementary, high school, and even in college as an extrovert person. Because, most likely, I'm always into talking with other persons and be able to cope up with something and be able to develop something with me as like I am a personal coach. Which most of the people who have problems in life will approach me and be able to talk to them in the way or manner that I always do. Of course, whenever there's some persons that would talk to me or would ask me something, whenever they have problems, they would always look up to me whenever their friends are not available. So in short, they go to me as the last resort, because I can be able to share something that I have experienced, or whenever I don't have that experience, like those of the problems that I am hearing from other persons. Basically, the thing that I would do is to give some advices that I can do to the best of my ability, because I haven't experienced those problems. Some problems whenever some persons would approach me and be able to help them in the way that I could be able to, in Tagalog, para matulungan ko sila sa paraan na makakaya ko. Yun. So, going back. So, now, let's rewind back to my basic education. But JM, why are you always getting to a story first in your past? Whenever there is 20s and 30s, later I will explain to you why I have shared this with you guys. So going back, let's rewind back to my basic education days when K-12 was not that prominent at that time. When I was in elementary days, I was like a child that would get a lollipop from bullies to be able to get away. But the bullies would steal it from me, which in Filipino, they would say oto, or being submissive in English terms. I know some of you podcast listeners would relate to me. Yes, I was really bullied all the time and was to get into the moment that I'll do something that make them submissive as well to be able to get attention to them. Sometimes, tampulan ako ng prefect of discipline or the guidance office kapag may nagagawa akong mali. To be able to do some community service, and since I'm a law-abiding citizen that could get me to be able to follow rules, I was to get into it. But something happened to me when I was in 7 years old. Wow. That was really a lot. It was 16 years ago. Or shall we say 25 years ago. I was bullied by a student by doing me to push around, and when I was rolling around the ground and had some cramps and my body had got me hard on it because I got something that could get me not to go walk for a long time. And that's where it hit me. Now, you might ask why I got cramps every time sometimes pushes me. Because I was sickly that time until 7 years old. Yes. Sometimes I got off balance. Sometimes I am into something that's not good. I am into always getting something that, okay, let's be for real. I was flat-footed. Yes. For those of you who haven't known me yet, I was flat-footed when I was born. So I cannot use any other kinds of shoes aside from the orthopedic shoes or sandals, which until now, in my 32 years of age, I have turned 32 last Wednesday. I'm still using orthopedic shoes and sandals up until now. So you might be able to get to that when we be able to share that in the next episodes of our podcast. So going back, moving fast forward, I used to get bullied also by my classmates about my eye. So you might have seen me in social media that my eye has something different. Most especially on my, I'm not so sure if it is on my right eye or left eye, but basically it's going to be on my right eye. Okay. So whenever my classmates would check on my eye and they have discovered something new, they would have to say, JM, ano yung nasa mata mo? What is in your eye? It's tear gland. But my classmates would bully me and get it and to say, Atay! Because they knew that I have this something in my eye, which is the tear gland, that if doctors would operate this eye, sorry for these terms, doctors had said to me, this is real, that if doctors would operate this eye, it will be a fast zipper that will close my right eye, and that my right eye would be my left eye would be the opening light for me. So the doctors advised me not to make the right eye tear gland to be able to be operated. So that's why when they saw my eyes tear gland in the left eye, they would bully me as a Thaiman. And whenever there's an awarding ceremonies for the top performing students, every flag ceremony in our school, and they would hear we have a tie, they will bully my tear gland and say to me in front, a tie. So basically, my classmates in elementary and high school would call me a Thai man because of the so-called tear gland that they thought it was liver-like. So that around time, I was so shy that up to the point in my life, they would get me up bullied, but here comes to the rescue of my former girlfriend, who happens to be my friend of my life, but we got no communications as of the moment. And I've got a story for that about my love life whenever we got into our college years. And you would hear that over the next few episodes. Baka kiligin kayo masyado, but I'm giving you a gist of this story. But you might have asked, JM, you're into making your life to call my life in 20s and 30s. But why you are sharing this to us? Now, I have said a while ago, you are already 32. But you are sharing your past life in your elementary and high school. And that was in the age that most of us would understand that. But why are you sharing this to us? Well, for simple reasons, most people don't know by past. Some of those persons couldn't remember it, but when they came back to them, they couldn't remember of who am I or what really am I. So now letting go of those past moments, and let's leap forward to the main part of the podcast, which is introducing the podcast program named My LCM. Again, it's not least common multiple, it's life-changing moments. And this is going to be my life in the 20s and 30s. So I've already have mentioned this already in my trailer that this podcast program would really entail the things of who we are and what secrets of success that you could be able to take it and might just work for you, just as I did before in my early 20s and early 30s. So the program My Life Changing Moments, My Life in 20s and 30s, involves sharing stories of my life in the past that could get you inspired to be able to develop everything to the best of our abilities. Not only that, take note of this, guys. Every last week of the month, we will get to share with you one guest that is in their 20s and 30s that's going to share with you, with them, that could entail your hearts and minds and might be able to relate to the stories of our guests every last week of the month, every last Monday of the month. But why my LCM if you'll be involving other guests? Well, simply because this My Life Changing Moments doesn't involve me alone. I needed to learn also something from persons which I'm really weak of. So it only means, in short, whatever I'm weak of, I could basically learn from my guests of how could I improve that weakness as a strength. And that could inspire you with a lot with our special guests that will be appearing on our podcast every last Monday of the month. And so that will it be for now. And I hope you've learned something from me of who am I. Oh, and by the way, a big shout out to the one who encouraged me a lot. And I've got inspiration from her to be able to do this podcast. It's going to be the host of Sarah's Bedtime Stories, The Art of 20s, which podcast is also available on Spotify to follow that podcast. And it's none other than Sarah May Look To, or known in Instagram as Sa May Look To. Thank you, Sarah, for the inspiring words that you're tackling on your podcast. And I'm really inspired every time I listen to your podcast. So if you're feeling lonely, blue, and lost, you can check out Spotify. You can check out my highly recommended listened podcast on Spotify, Sarah's Bedtime Stories, The Art of 20s. But of course, don't forget to come back every Monday as we'll begin our journey of sharing with you our biggest life-changing moments with My Life Changing Moments, My Life in 20s and 30s. This is JM, and this has been your greatest dream to be able to change your life in a moment of time. God bless, and catch you again here next Monday.